Hey, Leafs fam, Leafs converts, hockey world, what is up? This is the Leafs Convo. I am Norman James. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the podcast. It's a special one, part of our interview series. You can listen to all of our interviews in the playlist section of our YouTube page. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube page, you should probably do that right now. Mike Commito is set to join us. He is a newly appointed hockey historian for the Sudbury Wolves. He's also an author. His book, Hockey 365 Daily Stories from the Ice, drops on us September 22nd. You can pre-order your copy right now on Amazon, and I suggest you do it right now because by the end of our discussion, you will have done it. I promise you that. The man is very interesting, and the book that he is about to unleash on the hockey world is going to be an absolute beauty. Before we get into our discussion, I just wanted to say congratulations to the Toronto Marlies. Kyle Dubas, Sheldon Keefe, Ben Smith, Garrett Sparks, Andreas Janssen. These guys are incredible. That Game 7 against the Texas Stars at Ricoh Coliseum was one for the ages. Not only did they win the Calder Cup to become AHL champions for the first time as the Toronto Marlies franchise under the Toronto Maple Leafs thumb, they did it with authority. And I'm telling you what, this is the pre-meal cocktail, all done. Now this organization heads into the restaurant for the appetizer, and of course the main course is the Stanley Cup. And I have a feeling the Leafs are going to be eating a ton of main courses over the next 10 years. That's my 2 cents. Now we have to hear from Mike Commito. The man's got a lot to say, and I can't wait to hear him say it. The Leafs Conversation interview series starts right now. And we are joined by the man himself, new friend of the podcast, Mike Commito. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Not too bad. Thank you very much for joining the Leafs Convo podcast. I'm interested to get to know you a little bit better. I first heard of you through a lot of retweets on social media. This guy who had just landed a job as the hockey historian for the Sudbury Wolves. We'll get into your book that is going to be released in September. I'm looking forward to that too in just a bit. But hockey historian for the Sudbury Wolves. How cool is that, Mike?
I must admit, it is pretty cool. It's it's been my dream, to be a team historian in any capacity. Obviously, I think my ultimate goal, if it ever were to come true, would be to be a team historian at the NHL level. But for the Wolves to kind of really embrace their history and put in that role to kind of take charge of disseminating that history to the community and engaging with the fans. From when the team first arrived in Sudbury back in 1972 to fans who are just coming out to their first games this season. It's just an awesome opportunity, and I can't wait to really get rolling.
Mike Commito is our guest on the Leafs Convo podcast. Mike, I covered the London Knights for a decade and a half. Former Sudbury Wolf, Dale Hunter, of course, the infamous Dale Hunter. I covered the team for a very long time. I would get to talking to people who had been around the organization for many, many years before I arrived in London. And I began to appreciate the history of the team that you would either see on the walls of Budweiser Gardens, or you would see in your mind because you would have an old Don Branks giving you stories that would, animate your mind. Other than that, though, it never really felt like there was a place you could go to see a true collection, something that was vibrant, something visceral, something that you could almost felt tangible, that you could appreciate the history. I'd like to see that whole concept arise. And perhaps through the hiring of someone like yourself, you maybe inadvertently can help spearhead that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see something kind of come to fruition like that as well, because I think that, obviously my appointment is, the Wolves have made the relationship official. It's certainly not a full-time job. I obviously still work, 9 to 5 at Cambrian College, but I think this role is kind of pushing that idea forward, because certainly there's a lot of great, hockey historians out there at the junior ranks, at the NHL ranks, who have that passion for their local clubs. They've been documenting the history, for many years as well. I have a good family friend in Sault Ste. Marie, Chris Sears-Patowski, who's been doing it for quite a long time with the Greyhounds as well. And so I think that there's certainly an appetite for hockey history, at all levels, even at the junior and the junior B level locally. And I think that fostering that engagement with the club and getting fans to embrace the history of these teams that go back, much farther than some of the NHL clubs we follow.
Sure.
I think that's great, and I'm happy to be part of that initiative.
Are you a curator, an investigator? Are you digging through the archives, the bowels of the arena to try to uncover or unearth gems that have been hidden, or what do you do specifically?
Yeah, so it's definitely a lot of those things. I think when you're in the role of a team historian, obviously the first duty of any historian, whether you're with an NHL club or you're an academic historian, is to tell stories that are going to resonate with the public and resonate with the community. And so I think that above all else, it's my job as a historian to find great stories from the past that that can be told in a way that capture the imagination and really kind of bring fans, draw them in so that they want to learn more about the team's history and in turn kind of help fuel their passion for the contemporary team they're watching. Certainly, I haven't had the chance to really kind of invest a full day in the bowels of the Sudbury Community Arena. I've been in the storage area where we have a lot of the old pictures, so that's already been fun to kind of go through and see some of these old team photos that are tucked away there that that aren't available online or aren't available elsewhere. But I think another big part of my job as the team historian is engaging with the alumni. Because certainly to tell a lot of these stories, and I'm certainly using, as a historian, a lot of primary sources. So I'm going, online to newspaper databases, or I'm going to the library, or I'm pulling microfilm reels, and I'm going through, game recaps to find out what had happened and some of those quotes from those nights. But obviously there's no better sources than to talking to the people that were directly involved at the players, the coaching staff, or even the billet families. And so I think that through that, this role as a historian is also going to help, develop that relationship with the alumni and the team. And that's I think is an interesting challenge at the junior level, because obviously there's so many players that cycle through the organization that don't often end up pursuing hockey long term, right? So they're not all going to the NHL ranks where you can easily track them. Some of them go on, they'll play hockey elsewhere in Europe, or they'll play hockey at the university level. But many of them after junior, they'll go on to have professional careers. And we want to tell those stories as well, where we want to talk about the guys that still, made an impact in their community, raised families, did all these great things, but they just didn't do it in the hockey world. And so I think that's a big part of my role too, is to reach out to those alumni, get their stories, and try to bring them back into the alumni family.
Anything we can do to further emphasize the importance of the junior hockey culture across this country, I'm all for. For many of these guys, this is like reaching the NHL, is it not?
Oh, yeah. I think that you definitely see that, especially for the guys that are coming into the organization, whether it's in Sudbury or elsewhere, that, right? This is like, this could be for many of them, the pinnacle of the sport. And so many of them obviously do go on to, to professional hockey at various ranks. But for a lot of these guys, like this could be their last hurrah, right? And you certainly see the emotion, especially those junior players when we were watching the Memorial Cup a few weeks back. For many of them, like that's their last game that they may play at that type of level, right? And so I think that regardless of where you are and the teams you kind of root for, that at the junior level, it's still a huge deal, and it's a significant accomplishment story to get to that level. And so I think that's why people gravitate to it towards it as well, right? It's not only that these are going to be the future stars of the NHL or the AHL, but also that these guys a lot of these are community hometown boys, and they've reached a level that many aspire to, but few achieve.
Yeah, it is something to behold. 2016 Red Deer, I was there covering the London Knights. It was a incredible tournament. They did a really nice job putting it together, and then London dominated its way all the along the route to the final game, and then had a tough time closing it down, but they did. And Mike, it's really interesting watching these players intersect at this moment of peak, where you have some players who were stars on the team, well known in the community, highly regarded, but beyond that final game, it was going to be CIS hockey, maybe a professional opportunity in Europe. And these guys are either on a line or sitting next to the Mitch Marners or the Christian Dvoraks or the Matt Tkachuks, who are not only destined for the NHL and stardom, as we're seeing with the likes of Mitch Marner, but also not really having now to check their bank account to see if they have enough money to go watch a movie. I mean, it's interesting to see how these guys all coming up together hit that precipice, hit that wall, that threshold. Only a few are able to cross. Most do not get to cross it. So there is that bittersweet confrontation within at that point. Yet as time goes on, a lot of these guys who never made the NHL will be able to look back and say, what I was able to do was pretty rare in and of itself. And being able, in your position, to emphasize and highlight the history of this great game and these communities and teams like the Sudbury Wolves, help to rationalize and put into context the journey that these players were on and just how incredible it is.
Yeah, no, certainly I agree, and I appreciate that. I think that, even outside of the players, I think that the journey that a lot of the coaching staff and other personnel, rise from the junior ranks on. I had the privilege of talking to Scott Murray yesterday, who's the goaltending coach for the Capitals, and 5 years ago he was the goaltending coach for the Sudbury Wolves. So after applying his trade in Sudbury for 4 years, he got into the professional ranks at the AHL level with Hershey. And they kind of rose up through that organization, getting some mentorship from Ole Kolzig and Mitch Korn. And now, just a week ago, he was hoisting the Stanley Cup. And so I think it's great to be able to talk to these guys from all levels and from all facets of the organization to see, just how instrumental junior hockey is in advancing their career, whether that's on the ice or behind the bench or in the front office.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James, along with Mike Commito. He is an historian and an author. His book, Hockey 365 Daily Stories from the Ice, is set for release September 22nd. You can pre-order your copy now on Amazon. I just did. I can't wait to read it, Mike. And I'm really glad that you and I were able to meet on social media, because we can have a lasting friendship and a kinship and an interest here, because I love hockey history books. I have tons of stuff from Mike Leonetti, Ron McFarland, Bob Duff, Ken Dryden. I'm just a sucker for hockey's history, and I think I've pointed that out to you on social media. You do a nice job emitting these incredible, beautifully colored photos from hockey's past, and I get lost in them, and I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, no, and I just want to back up and say thank you for pre-ordering. Obviously, I really appreciate that, and thank you for checking out those tweets. It's certainly been something that I think Twitter's kind of allowed me to explore a little bit more. That hockey's always been, especially the history of the game, has always been a passion of mine, and history in general has been a passion of mine, because that's where I took my schooling, and that's the direction my career has gone. And I played hockey when I was younger, not at an organized level. I was more of on the backyard rinks or wherever it may be, and never got into it at an organized peewee or house league level. And I don't think it was because that I realized I was obviously never good enough to play, but I think that, I had those moments on the ice where I just loved the game regardless of what level I was playing at. And that as I got older, despite the fact that I never got into hockey, that I got back into hockey, playing rec hockey with some guys here in Sudbury, but it was taking the skills that I've had developed as a historian and realizing that, despite the fact that I may not be the most fleetest of foot on the ice or don't have the best hands, that there's another way that I can kind of, get immersed into the game, and that's by exploring the history of the game. And I think that what's great about doing that is there are so many people out there who love the history as well, right? And I think that I see that on a daily basis with some of the response to the tweets I put out, and some of the conversations I have with people, that it's such a great game, and it has such a rich history, and there's so many hockey historians out there and people that just love the history, that it's great to be a part of that community.
Yeah, I'm really excited for your book. I can't wait to read it, and whatever we can do to spread the word, we're all for it. This is the Leafs Convo. I'm Norman James. Mike Commito is our guest. You can catch our latest podcast, Mike Augello and I, going over potential scenarios for John Tavares and the Maple Leafs. Slim to almost none, but there's still a very slim chance. And we also break down some of the player possibilities that the Leafs may endeavor towards in order to help upgrade their center situation. Mike, you mentioned that you didn't really have the hockey skills to graduate and move on and advance towards the highest levels. We all have hockey skills that are innate in us as Canadians. I grew up playing baseball. I went to the United States and played baseball in college. And, I always said that baseball was in my heart, but hockey was in my blood. The Mitch Marners of the world and the Dale Hunters of the world, they all started on the backyard rink. They all started in the driveway or on streets.
The origins of all of that, I think, is the common thread throughout that, right? That, again, regardless of who plays the game, and obviously there's obviously innate talent that those players have to get to those highest levels. But yeah, I think that's what draws a lot of us to the game and to follow the sport, is that we all kind of came from the same beginnings, right? That a lot of those same guys had grown up or first started to learn how to skate on outdoor rinks or on a makeshift rink in their backyard or on a frozen pond or a lake, right? And I mean, that's where the game originated from. on those frozen lakes and ponds. And so I think we see a lot of ourselves in those players, right? And that's, I think, what draws us to the game, but what also, makes us stay and follow these guys throughout the course of their careers, even after their hockey careers end.
Okay, before I let you go, Mike, Hockey 365 Daily Stories from the Ice. Your book's set to be released September 22nd. Maybe you can just give us a couple of hints, a couple of Easter eggs, a couple of nuggets that we can get excited about.
Yeah, for sure. So it is really kind of an offshoot of my Twitter account, where every day I'll explore a different moment in hockey history along the lines of on this day. Today, for example, 1985, the Leafs drafted Wendell Clark first overall at the NHL draft. And so I took a lot of that work that I've been doing on Twitter for the last few years, and I kind of decided it'd be an interesting idea for a book where I take one of those daily snapshots for every day of the year and expand it so that it's a story. So I have 366 short stories if you count leap years, which I did. And so each of those stories represents a different hockey anniversary or a different moment in hockey history. So it really has everything from the Summit Series in 1972, to Willie O'Ree's first goal, becoming the first Black player to score a goal in the NHL level. And so for the most part, what I've done is I've just tried to pick moments where they either resonate with me or I think that they would resonate with the reader. Certainly, there's some of my Maple Leafs bias in there coming through, and I picked a lot of moments that I think will resonate with Maple Leafs fans. The one thing that I would spoil is that I try to be the objective historian throughout and kind of take a step back and let the facts and the sources kind of speak for themselves. But there was one moment where I had to insert myself into the narrative, and that was for Austin Matthews' 4-goal debut for the Leafs in 2016. And the reason why I did that was because my daughter was born 2 weeks before that. And,
wow.
And I watched the game with her. She was sleeping, but she was wearing Maple Leafs pajamas, and, my wife was beside us. And it really was one of those special moments where my wife knew how much, I love hockey and how much I love the Leafs. And she couldn't believe that this game was happening, that he was scoring all these goals. And, to have my daughter Zoe there, sleeping, of course, but she was still there. It's just kind of one of those moments where that'll be a story that I'll tell her, for a long time. And so I thought that, obviously chronicling his night on its own is noteworthy. But, for me personally, and I think a lot of Leafs fans probably have that moment where, where were you on that night when Austin had his debut? And so I think that's something where a lot of people can relate to. But certainly for me, it was a special night for sure.
Mike, I'm glad I have the central air on because you're making me melt right now, man. That was just fantastic. I have 2 young kids, and I'm telling you, they weren't able to sleep last night because they knew the Marlies were in a Game 7 situation against the Stars, and they've been so excited about the Marlies. And it's really ridiculous that kids 8 and 6 are so pumped up about minor league hockey, but because their dad is really driving this Leafs Convo podcast, they're immersed in the culture that is alive and well in the house right now. And they were really excited for Game 7. And we called them down with 2 or 3 minutes to go in the game, and we knew the Marlies were going to win. And they weren't sleeping. They should have been sleeping at 9:30 or whatever. They came down. We experienced the game together. It was a great moment, and it was the kind of moment that you just conveyed to us and that you just shared with us, that millions of Canadians and Americans too share almost on a nightly basis when there's a hockey game on. Mike Commito, thank you so much for your time, man. And the next time you come on the Leafs Convo, I'm going to have you play Forgotten Leafs. So I know you're a hockey historian, but brush up even more, my friend. I'm stumping people left, right, and center.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That'd be great.
Hey, you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Commito. And it's worth it. He tweets out incredible images from the NHL's past, hockey's past. I lose myself in these pictures. I know you will too. If you love hockey the way it is now, but also the way it was, I promise you, Mike Commito is definitely worth the follow. While you're at it, go ahead and follow me on social media at I Am Sports Heart. Follow the podcast at The Leafs Convo, and of course, Mike Augello at Mike in Buffalo. Have you liked and subscribed to the podcast on the YouTube page? You should do it now. We have tons of listeners, thousands of listeners, but only a certain percentage of those listeners are subscribing at this point. You know you're going to do it. Go ahead and do it now. We are committed to you. Commit to us. We promise you we will not let you down. One more thing to pitch you, and that's TLC Gear. Bonfire.com/TLC-gear. $20 plus shipping and handling will get you an OG piece of clothing that you can cherish for your entire life. We have 100 available. A Leafs Convo t-shirt that you can wear with pride. You feel this podcast, here is your opportunity to wear it. The address to go and make your purchase is on the screen right now if you are watching us on YouTube. If you're not watching us on YouTube and you're listening to us through one of the many podcast platforms that booms out our signal, the link will be in the podcast description and podcast information. For Mike Commito, I'm Norman James. Thank you so much for listening to the Leafs Convo Interview Series. We'll talk to you again real soon. Peace.